Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as J-Monster, and I want to welcome you to the official Third Age Reforged YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at a brand new faction, and I want to preface this video with a few things. One, this faction is not going to take away any development resources at all, in any way, shape, or form from Rhudaur and Dol Guldur. We'll still be moving forward with those two factions, and they will be as robust as ever. Currently in Reforged 0.97, we are pruning a lot of units that are of dubious usefulness, or simply redundant, or have been replaced by some new additions. So, most of the units in this faction either already exist in the game, or the core roster, which is being added, which is unique to this new faction. And I'm just going to say right now, it's Numenor. You may have guessed. They are pretty well covered several times over by the amount of units that we will be removing. So don't worry about it. Rhudaur and Dol Guldur will still happen, and they will be as robust as their creators intended them to be. That being said, I also have a small announcement about the ModDB Mod of the Year awards, which are now open for general voting. If you guys like the work that we've come out with over the last year, since the last awards back in December, where we placed 4th, which is a very, very strong showing out of a possibility of like 40,000 or 35,000 mods or so in ModDB, it was really an honor to be chosen by the various communities to be in 4th place. This year, we want to do even better. We want to try and get into the top 3. So it would be very appreciated by myself and by the rest of the team and by the community if you guys could take a moment, head over to the ModDB page, check out the new model for the for this new unit. I'll just give you the name right here, the Royal Legion of Armenelos, the capital of Numenor. Give us a vote on ModDB. We appreciate the support. Thank you so much in advance. But with all of that being said, let's take a look at Numenor, and we're going to talk a little bit about the faction design and the philosophy behind them, and some of the reactions that the testers and myself have had because of our experiences with Numenor. And I'll also address at the end some concerns that I know that many people may have by watching this video. So, with that being said, let's take a look at some of the elites here. First, we have the Royal Legion of Armenelos. These guys are Inspire. I believe they also cause fear, and as many Numenoreans tend to be, they are locked morale. Much of the Numenorean roster is locked morale, just because that's how our Numenoreans tend to work, but a lot of them are elite, expensive units. The rank and file will not fight to the death, because that would simply be absurd. It would be way too much power for a brand new faction. We don't want to make them unbalanced. Obviously, we want these guys to fit really nicely into the jigsaw puzzle of diversity that is Reforged. So the Royal Legion of Armenelos, a very strong unit, at least on par, even I would say better than the Blackguard of Angmar. They give a little bit of Inspire traits. They don't have a ton of Inspire, and that's one of the downsides to playing as Numenor, is that you don't have a ton of Inspire units, and the ones that you do are quite expensive. That being said, Numenor's morale is extremely high. Their baseline units have about 15, and the rest of their more elite units are locked morale anyway, so they won't be going anywhere. But let's move on now from the Royal Legion of Armenelos, and let's move over to the Temple Executioners, who have a brand new reskin designed for Numenor, but it will also be available to any faction that can use them. One thing to note about Numenor, as I mentioned earlier, is that many of their units exist in other factions. That being said, the way that they were added and with the core roster, it does give Numenor a distinct playstyle, which we'll go over. But I just kind of want to allay concerns about them just being a thrown together kind of reskin faction. That is definitely not the case. So the Temple Executioners here are as strong as they ever were in Mordor, and very fitting for a faction like Numenor, and we may see some campaign mechanics tied to certain choices you can make that will give you access to either the Temple Guard or the Naro units, which are coming in from Umbar. So move over here to the Temple Guard, and of course we're going to have the Temple Guard of the Numenoreans being the progenitor of the dreaded Numenorean steel bow, which for all intents and purposes was a weapon of mass destruction. Everyone who had to stand against Numenor feared this weapon, and as such they have this AP Archer, extremely deadly, actually got buffed a little bit in patch 0.97 with an extra point of damage, just to help them overcome some of the knight units that have high shield values, which this unit is intended to hunt. So we have some AP Archers here, very expensive, 2 HP, also very strong. Then we have, of course, the Numenorean Shield Guard, the same unit that is in Mordor as well. Not a unit you want to mess around with. Once these guys pop up, they can do tremendous damage with their body-piercing arrows, and as as many of the Numenoreans tend to be there, also lock morale. So if you want to put these guys down, you got to make sure you kill every single last one of them. Let's move on now to some of the faithful units. We have some familiar faces from Umbar. We have the Numenorean Royal Guard, one of the few units in Numenor that has a custom Inspire effect. These guys give +5, so if you need your phalanx to hold the line even better than it already does with their high morale scores, this is the unit to try and mix in with them. Very strong support units, as many of the faithful units tend to be. The Mordor units are a little bit more offensively minded, so the golden ones, which is they're the more offensive elites, a little bit more loyal to their king, Arfarzon on the Golden, who they're themed after. Got some Numenorean Shield Guard here as well, familiar faces. Numenor Sentinels from Umbar, and I think these guys give some small Inspire, but they are definitely not a custom effect. Then of course we have the Numenorean Lancers, one of the few cavalry units that Numenor can field. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but Numenorean Cav is exceedingly limited. The strength of Numenor canonically comes from their skirmish units. You're going to see a lot of powerful skirmish units available to Numenor, and their infantry. Whereas cavalry, while they had skill in cavalry, not really a ton of use for horses on a ship, which is what Numenor primarily was, a naval power. So there's some of the support units. Let's move on now to the rank and file, which are, I'm actually really excited to show off to you because they kind of define the way that Numenor is played in a lot of ways. So over here we have the Remena Sentinels, which is a port in Numenor. I can't remember exactly what district it's in, but this is a very strong pike unit. And I suppose we should probably look at the stats for these guys. Most of the other units you know the stats for, they're pretty well the same they are in patch 0.96 or 0.96.1, but these guys are no joke. They are 8 armor, as many of the Numenorean rank and file units tend to be. You can also upgrade their armor to give them 10. And they've got 3 defense skill, which is pretty well average for a pike unit, but their damage and their armor are really where these units shine. 9 damage on a unit that costs 775. A little bit, actually significantly better than the Gondorian pikes, who have the same damage score. The Remena Sentinels are basically a cut above a lot of pikemen in the game. Their melee defense is pretty well average, about where you'd expect it to be, but their high armor and high damage makes them exceptional. And of course, when you upgrade them, they get that full plate look. 10 armor on a unit like this, it is not going anywhere. And there's a fair amount of them in there as well. Not quite so many as units like the Uruk-hai pikemen, but given their damage and their armor scores, it is a lot of numbers for a unit like that to have. That being said, one of Numenor's weaknesses in general is their small numbers and expensive units. So we move over here to the Remena Marksmen, which are very much a staple of the Numenorean line. You can see that they are a high tier archer, quite expensive. They do a fair amount of damage as well, 8 damage on these units. And they've got 4 shield along with their 8 armor, which can be upgraded to 10 of course, making them extremely tanky. And since this is Numenor's only archer pick, normally archer units are capped at 2, however the Remena Marksmen are capped at 4. So you have an opportunity to bring quite a lot of these units, and once they run out of ammunition, they are no joke in melee, and you can use them to support your phalanx even further. Moving on over here, we have the Remena Marines, who are the main state infantry unit for Numenor. Got a bit of a Roman Legion vibe going on here. Again, 8 armor, really high defense skill, far higher than any man-at-arms unit, basic man-at-arms unit in the game so far, even from the Numenorean Inheritors, and a respectable shield value of 7. They also have 10 damage and a really deadly missile attack. They've only got a couple of volleys, so they're kind of like your Roman legionaries. They are heavily armored, very adept in close quarters, and with their javelins, they make excellent shock troops. These guys are no joke. However, what I have noticed is that people will target them right away because of how much of a threat they are. They are capped at 4, so you can bring a significant amount of them, just like the other units. I think they're all capped at 4. And yeah, you can really make a big impact on the battlefield with the Remena Marines. And this is really probably one of the most important units in Numenor's roster. If you can get good value out of these guys and use them to chunk off a lot of your enemy's forces, and they're almost certainly going to outnumber you in a lot of cases, but if you're fighting the elves, these guys are even more devastating because of the low numbers of the elven units. These guys do so much damage so quickly that they can be a real nightmare to face. So they're going to be a huge target, and it's really going to, a lot of your games are really going to depend on how much use you can get out of your Remena Marines. So use them wisely, protect them, and yeah, they will serve you well, and of course you can upgrade them to 10 armor. Very, very strong mainstay infantry. Now you can move on to some of their non-HP elites. We have the Eldolande Swordmasters. Take a look at their stats there. And these guys are no joke either. Very, very high armor values. Higher, I think, than any other Swordmaster unit for the human factions in the game. They've also got 14 skill, which is very respectable, reaching like elven levels of skill at that point. 16 damage and 15 charge. These guys are monstrous on the charge. And once they're stuck in melee, they are not going anywhere. Their big drawback, of course, is their 900 cost price tag and 103 soldiers in the unit. It is balanced somewhat by the fact that they both inspire and cause fear, and they have very, very high morale scores as well. I think they're a little bit higher than the average unit, so they've got about 16 morale instead of 15. These guys do not flee easily. Moving on now to a new bodyguard type, which has been added. Pretty well unique to Numenor at this point, but it is something I'd like to experiment with a little bit more in the future. We currently have 2 HP Lancer bodyguards, but what we don't have are melee bodyguards. We have melee knights, which function pretty well the same way as just really, really, really elite high-tier melee cavalry. But now we have the Eldolande Nobles, and they are a melee bodyguard. The Eldolande Nobles have, I believe, +5 versus cavalry, which contrasts them to the +10 of melee knights. They've also got a little bit less stats, just because I didn't want to overpower them entirely. But they do have some very respectable armor values, really good at fairly good defense skill at the very least, and of course they've got a respectable 7 shield value, so arrows will do nothing to these units. They are nearly impervious, and against all but knight units they are going to perform extremely well. They are very much intended to be a counter to most of the cavalry in the game. However, knights being the elite, the elite of the elite in terms of cavalry supremacy, will be able to knock these guys over relatively easily. They are not super expensive, however, so it is worth noting that you can afford them into a good deal of Numenor builds. Moving on over here, we have an old favorite which has received a facelift and a brand new name. We have the Alcarondas Legion, previously known as the Castamir's Legion. Many of you guys know them. 850 price tag, locked morale. These guys very, very strong, high damage as well. But their big draw, I think, is their 5 melee defense over the Romana Marines, and the fact that they are locked morale. These guys will hold the line no matter what, so they are extremely reliable, but they are quite expensive, so working them in can be a bit of an issue. And then finally, we've actually got a few new units left, because I forgot to include one, but don't worry, we'll get to them. We have a single unit of Ballista. So the Numenoreans, of course, are going to be able to use artillery. Unfortunately, the crew here it's a little bit invisible. That is something that is going to be fixed, of course, for release. We move on over here to the Trebuchet, and you can see that it's currently the Arnor, I believe, the Trebuchet crew for Arnor. But I believe the Numenorians will be getting a special reskin that is unique to their faction. And of course, they have a Trebuchet. Trebuchet is being available to all Numenorean inheritor factions like Gondor, Cardolan, Arthedain, etc. But I have one final unit to show you. Let's take a look at it right now. In front of you, you are seeing the Alcarondas Legion. You can get a look at some of the officers here, which are unique to Numenor. And this, of course, is what their general looks like. And this is our Pharazôn the Golden himself, the last king of Numenor, and he is no joke. The Alcarondas Faithful are a melee knight unit. They are a bit smaller than other knight units, but their power is commensurate, of course, to their size. They are available not only to Numenor, but also to Umbar. So this is a unit that will be coming to Umbar. But Umbar is getting some roster changes to compensate for the fact that they are getting a cavalry supremacy unit. Mainly, they are losing their merchant cavalry. So Umbar is going to have very limited cavalry, just like Numenor, and the Numenorean cavalry is even more limited still. One other thing to note is that they are quite expensive, but if you look at their stats, very formidable indeed. Not an easy unit to knock down with their 11 armor skill, or armor value, plus their 18 skill and 8 shield. These guys are vulnerable to being overwhelmed by numbers, especially large numbers of elite cavalry can give them a really hard time. So you want to try and support this unit with the rest of the Umbar roster. There are some Numenorean Spearmen that are in there. You've got a ton of options in terms of missiles to try and chunk down your enemies and to support your cavalry, which are going to be very important for you. Numenorean cavalry, as you've probably noticed, are expensive and very, very few in number. They are support units uniquely, and you need to use them as such, at least in my experience so far. But yeah, that just about does it for the Numenorean roster. Let's talk a little bit more about the faction in general. So Numenor, as I mentioned previously, is intended to be an elite-only faction. They are one of the finest fighting forces in Middle-earth, but it is very easy to lose with Numenor, which is a state of affairs that I'm kind of okay with. I obviously don't want them to be weak, but being one of the best fighting forces in Numenor does not mean that they are easy to use, and I don't think that it should mean that either. They are, in my experience at least, very rewarding to play. If you make good decisions and break good compositions with Numenor, you can be extremely successful. It is a little bit easier to get success with Numenor when you are on the defensive, and for that reason they make an extremely valuable supporting faction. Numenor plus Angmar, for example, is an absolutely devastating combination in a 2v2 setting. If you can back up the rush of Angmar with the heavily armored and the heavily armored nature and the killing power of Numenor and their skill at all of their support units, it is such a hard combination to knock down. So I think that they definitely fit into the game. They are probably the smallest faction in terms of roster that we've seen so far, and their cost and their lack of low tiers make them pretty well unique among the 21 factions of Reforged that have been added to date. So I wanted to look at a little bit about some of the army compositions here, because when this faction came out, I was really excited, and I made a whole bunch of these, and I'll explain them to you as I go through. Now, I find that it is best to try and go for a balanced approach with Numenor if you can, and try and leave yourself a little bit of extra money left over so that you can buff some key units. So for our front line, I'm going to be bringing 3 Romana Marines and 3 Marksmen. That's going to be the core of our army, and you can see it's already taken pretty well over half of our total budget just to get these units. I find Temple Guard to be extremely important, especially in terms of an anti-cavalry deterrent, and I also want to bring a couple units of the Eldolandi Swordmasters and a couple of the Alcarondas Legion, which doesn't really leave me with a ton of other options. So what I could try and do here is focus uniquely on my cavalry, bring a unit of cavalry, and maybe another unit here of the Numenorean Sentinels. And with the Temple Guard, I can do potentially very well against really deadly, heavily armored cavalry. But if I'm expecting to run into some serious resistance, I might just consider bringing 2 units here. So I have some Eldolandi Nobles and some Numenorean Lancers that I will try and keep in reserve. Let's see the Numenorean Sentinels. I think that they inspire. Yes, indeed they do, and they're going to be an important part of our main line, so I'll keep them on the front line with everyone else. And then I'll use some of my extra funds here to buff my mainline units. Now I know my Romana Marine units are going to come under pretty heavy fire, so I'm going to give them some armor to try and keep their numbers up and try and keep their survivability as high as I can. A couple of armor, or rather attack upgrades to the Eldolandi Swordmasters, who are going to be an important anti-infantry tool. And then finally, an extra buff to my Eldolandi Nobles. And if that is looking like a small force to you for the Kingdoms of Men, well, that is because it is. And probably the most important unit in this roster, or the 2 most important, are going to be, or in this build, I mean not roster, are the Romana Marines and the Romana Marksmen. This is a build that is going to necessitate you to play defensively. You're of course going to want to keep your Eldolandi Swordmasters safe, so make sure that you use your Eldolandi Nobles and your Numenorean Lancers, and of course your Temple Guard in support very wisely to try and keep them safe, because they are going to carry the infantry fight for you in the event that things go horribly awry. So altogether, a very defensive build, but I have heard that Numenor can be a very strong rush faction, and I'm kind of interested to make a build that would make that work. So I think any rush faction rush build is going to include a lot of Romana Marines, just because of how much damage they can do. They've got a fair amount of survivability when you upgrade them, and you can mix them in with some pretty nasty tools. So a couple of Eldolonde Swordmasters would be a nice thing to have in that kind of situation. Great support for the Numenorians, or for the Romena Marines. They're all Numenorians. A couple of Numenorean Shield Guards to keep the cavalry at bay. At least one Eldolonde Noble. And then we're going to need to get into a few of the supporting units. So in this case, I think if we're going for a full infantry rush, only a couple units of Romena Marines are really necessary. And then you have a choice here between some Numenorean Shadow Guard and some Temple Guard. In this case, I'm going to bring some Numenorean Shadow Guard, just because I want to try and make a build without the Temple Guard, as they seem to figure very prominently in most of the builds that I make. And then I think a Royal Legion of Armenelos is going to be an important tool in this build. And then, of course, I can bring a unit here of Numenorean Lancers to try and support the rest of my army and to do some serious damage. Numenorean Lancers are no joke on the charge, but we could, if we decided we wanted a little bit more of a numbers approach and wanted to feel a little bit more secure in fighting against cavalry, a couple units of Romena Sentinels will probably do the trick. It is going to necessitate us to remove some armor upgrades on a couple of units, but that's okay. We get 2 more units of Romena Sentinels out of the deal, so it's not so bad. But there you go. A potential rush build with Numenor. You could play it potentially a little bit differently, but I think it's kind of okay as it is. I like the Royal Legion of Armenelos. I think that they'll serve you really well, and it does leave us with a fair amount of money left over to give to some of these units, like a Romena Marksman. Make them a little bit more tanky, and then once the infantry fight starts, we'll be able to get some more use out of them as well. So an interesting build here. It's not one that I can say that I've tried, but in theory it would be fun to try, especially if you're playing against factions like the Elves. Potentially wipe out a front line of high-tier Elven units with those 4 units of Romena Marines in pretty short order. Let's go with one more unit that's based a little bit more around the elites. So let's take a couple units there. One's going to be the Royal Legion of Armenelos, the other one's going to be the Temple Guard. We're also going to take some Alcaronda's Legion. This one's going to be also numbers focused. We'll hold off on that for the time being. 3 units of Marines, 3 units of the Romena Marksmen, 1 unit of Cavalry. We could forgo the Cavalry entirely and go for something a little bit more like this. And then we'd have money left over to potentially get another elite unit. So if we wanted some Numenorean Shadow Guard, we could bring them. A nice little addition with our 3 units of Romena Marksmen. And this would be something I'd play a little bit more in a support capacity. Given how many specialty archer units we have, what I might do is drop the Temple Guard and just swap them out for some Eldolonde Nobles, just in case you need them. In a team battle especially, this is, I think, a build that could be very, very powerful. You've got a lot of options here for protecting your cavalry. You've got some really powerful infantry. We've got a good amount of Romena Marines, which, as I said, are pretty well the linchpin of any Numenorean army. You've got the Phalanx, and you can pair those Marines with the Romena Sentinels, and you've got a fair amount of range support here as well, in the form of 3 units of Romena Marksmen and, of course, the Numenorean Shadow Guard. So just a few potential builds here. You can see it's a little bit more numerous than some of the other ones that we've made with 1,800 men, which is a lot of Numenorians to have to face down. But yeah, that's it for the theory so far. How do you guys feel about watching a few battles with Numenor? I got a few I want to show off to you, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'll join you guys in the battlefield in just a few moments. So today, to round off our Numenorean video, I've got a 3 versus 3 game with 3 Numenorean factions facing down a nice selection of different and, in many cases, unlikely allies on the opposite team. But the first army I'm going to look at today is, of course, one of the Numenorians. This one is being played by DF Peak, one of our testers, and a very experienced player indeed. He's got, I believe, 3 units of the Romena Marksmen here, forming his skirmishing line. Got some Numenorian Lancers, 1 unit of Alcaronda's Faithful, a couple units of supporting Romena Marines, 1 here, 1 on the other flank, and of course they have some armor upgrades as well. A ton of Alcaronda's Legion here, I believe in the form of 3 units of Alcaronda's Legion and 3 units of Romena Sentinels with their armor upgrade, going to be forming the main line and the majority of the killing power for the Numenorean, for this particular Numenorean build. Also got some Royal Legion of Armenelos. I know their banners are a little bit weird right now. They look like the Umbar banners, and that's because they pretty well are. But that's going to be changing. They're going to get some banners that are unique to Numenor for the time being. It's just a placeholder. It's a test badge. Bear with us. Moving on now to Peak's ally, we have Starling, one of our other experienced testers. He's got, I believe, 3 units at least of the Romana Marksmen. He's also got a bunch of Romana Marines, but these guys do not have their armor upgrades. I believe he has the max amount here, so we're going to see 4 Romana Marines in the battlefield today. He's also got some Numenorean Lancers. Starling, surprisingly enough, brought the max amount of cavalry. So he's got 1 unit of Numenorean Lancers. I think he's got some more over here. 1 unit of the Eldolande Nobles and the Alcarondas Faithful as well. So a lot of cav on the part of Numenor in this battle. And then a third and final line of Romana Sentinels. I believe he's also got a single unit of the Rhudaur Sentinels in the center there. 3 units of pikes in total. And then to top it all off, Starling has also brought the Deadly Temple Guard. Moving on now to the third and final Numenorean Army. We have the forces of Lango, another one of our testers. He's got some Numenorean Shield Guard. I actually really like this army. It is extremely high in numbers, but it's got a lot of support potential as well. So we've got the 1 unit there of the Numenorean Shield Guard. I believe 2... He's actually got 4? No, 3 units in total of the Romana Marksmen. 2nd unit of the Numenorean Shield Guard. Some Temple Guard. Eldolande Nobles. 1 unit of the Alcarondas Faithful. And then, of course, we've got some Alcarondas Legion, which I believe is where the general's going to be today. Actually, what do you know? It's not. And that pretty well does it for Lango's army. So let's go ahead and move on now and see what their enemies have brought to the battle today. Across the field from Lango, we have the forces of Rohan, who have recently got a brand new facelift, and damn are they sexy. Here we have the Red Shield of Urkebrand, a skirmish cavalry / melee cavalry hybrid. Got some Rhudaur cavalry as well, rocking their new digs with some beautiful reskins done by Cowering Coma. Rhudaur cavalry ain't no joke on the charge. Not great once in close quarters, however, as many Lancers tend to be. 2 units here of the Shieldmans of Eowyn currently have not got their fine new reskin, but I know that Cowering Coma will be working a little bit more on Rohan in the future. He's got a few projects going on right now, and if you guys want to see the results of his creativity and hard work, then I recommend you go and check out our ModDB page. Over here we got some Helmingas. Nice little buff for Rohan generally in this patch, is in that most of their infantry units have gotten smaller, but they've gotten significantly more useful. Got some Eastmark Spearmen here with their limited, but still nonetheless potentially deadly javelins. They've been added in 0.97, and that's a real problem for a faction like Numenor. If Numenor takes attrition very, very, very quickly, it can be an absolute catastrophe for them. So a unit like the Eastmark Spearmen that can be brought in great quantities can be a real pain in the ass when you're playing as Numenor. Got some Westmark Spearmen here as well with their new model done by Cowering Coma. Westmark Marshals, again, brand new model, a lot better I think than they are in the current iteration of the game, 0.96.1. More Eastmark Spearmen. They're going to be protecting the ballista piece here from Grim, by the way, who's playing as Rohan. Got some more Helmingas, more Eastmark Spearmen, more Westmark Marshals, and some more Spearmen as well. Then we get into the pride and joy of the Rohan army, Rhudaur Cavalry, a Raid of Aldberg. I think he's got a knight unit as well. Yes, indeed, the Sons of Eorl. So a nice balanced Rohan army. Not as much cavalry as you would expect to see, but still a fair amount nonetheless. Let's move on now to one of his allies. We have Rhudaur being commanded by DF's 2nd Pink. He's brought some Coldfell Maidens, Jav Cav, ain't no joke. Got some Rhudaur Swordsmen mixed in here as well. A ton of pikes. Look at this beautiful Deadly Dunman Pikeman wall. Got, I believe, 2 units of Trollshaw Axe Throwers as well. Going to support his rush. 2 units of Edmore's Troll Hunters, who have gotten a small buff, I think mostly to melee defense. I think they've also gotten a little bit smaller than they are by about 20 men, so about a 50 unit in reduction. But of course their stats have gone up commensurate with that change. Got some Renanine Pikemen as well. Very strong unit of pikes here from Rhudaur. Yet more Dunman Pikemen, more Rhudaur Swordsmen, ton of infantry. Mostly, it seems like this army is tuned at overwhelming his Numenorean opponents with numbers, but we'll see how their bastard children fare against their progenitors. Got some more Coldfell Maidens over here, and then finally, unit of Renanine Nobles. Not the tankiest of knights, but they are armor-piercing, which can lend itself very, very well to taking down heavily armored cavalry and even other knights in close quarters. Moving on now to the third and final, I guess this is the blue team. Yeah, this would be the blue team army, and this is the person who sent into the replay to me. This is Mech Creed, one of our former tournament champions. So as you've seen so far, a lot of these players you've definitely seen in games before. They are not any less experienced than their opponents themselves, which is why this battle turned out to be so damned good. In any case, got some Bardian Marksmen here. Got a nice little buff in the patch, got smaller, however they are now more elite, and when you upgrade them like Creed has here, they make formidable I would say upper mid tier, like close to high tier infantry. Got some Daily Marksmen here as well, good attack values on them, lower defensive stats of course than the Bardian Marksmen, and lower attack damage overall. However, there are more of them, and they're a little bit less expensive than their Bardian counterparts. Over here we got some Earls of Dale, got a nice buff, an extra 10 men in the unit. Ain't no joke in melee. They are high tier melee cavalry, but they do tend to lose to two-handed units who have far faster animations. Got some Lake Town pikemen, a bunch of Barding Herd. I think there's a couple units of Lake Town River Patrol, which are a javelin unit hidden in here as well. Being a Dalish army, very, very skirmish heavy, but they've also got some nice melee staying power here that are extremely tanky in the form of the Barding Herd. And then a second unit here of Lake Town pikemen, and finally a Ballista. In behind them, we have the famous Blackshot Dragon Slayers, an AP missile unit to rival and indeed surpass the Temple Guard from the Numenorians across the field. And then, of course, we have one final unit here of Dalian Cavalry. Altogether, pretty damned nice force. And this army in particular does seem to be aimed at dealing damage from range, as you would expect from the Dalian unit. So if they're able to overwhelm the admittedly limited but tanky Numenorean skirmish line, then they're going to be in a great position to inflict some serious attrition on the Numenorians before the lines even close. Dalish infantry versus Numenorean infantry, that is a no-brainer. Dale's going to lose that fight 9 times out of 10, but if they can whittle them down at range, then Dale definitely has a chance to do some serious work. All that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this replay. I hope you guys enjoy it. Well, after much fuss and ado with both sides having an extended skirmish phase and minimal casualties being inflicted, only 2% on one side and 3% on the side of Numenor have been inflicted at this fairly advanced stage in the game. We're coming up to about the quarter mark here, but now we've got a little bit of action. You can see some Dalian cavalry here under Creed, looking to take a big, ugly bite out of those Rohan marksmen that Peak has brought far too far forward. It doesn't seem to even notice the threat, and it seems like those Dalian Lancers are going to be able to connect with Rohan marksmen. They are tanky, but they're not going to stand up to a Lancer hit. And that's going to kill a fair amount of men from that unit. Peak is finally going to countercharge there with his Numenorean Lancers, which is going to see the Dalian Cavalry off. Also worth noting that Starling was nearby, able to lend a little bit of support, avenge the deaths of about 12 or so of their fallen brothers. They're going to shower the Dalian Cavalry in the rear as they attempt to retreat, inflicting some light casualties. All in all, given the amount of damage that the marksmen sustained versus how much the Dalian Cavalry also took in return, it seems a little bit even. Pretty well both sides lost about the same amount of value. Meanwhile, we have the Rhudaur player, Second Pink, who has moved his entire army as far away from Starling as he possibly could, which is really one of the only options that he has, unless he wants to rush into that line, which he doesn't, and I don't blame him. He doesn't have a whole lot of options in terms of combating the formidable Numenorian skirmish line. He has no skirmishers himself. He's gone pretty well full infantry, so it's going to be down to a little bit of teamwork here with Dale to maybe isolate Peak, who is by far, I would say, the smaller of the Numenorean armies, and therefore easier to overwhelm with their superior numbers. Yeah, those two working together could be able to break this Numenorean wing entirely, and then Starling would be quite hard-pressed, I feel, to face them both down on his own. For starters, he would definitely have to turn and fight them, which is going to expose his rear to the Rohirrim cavalry, which is not going to be... It's never something that you want to do. You don't want to put yourself in that sort of vulnerable position if you can help it. But speaking of Rohan, got some action over here. Grim sallying forward with everything he's got. The Rohirrim army surging together in unison. Eastmark Spearman getting a little bit too close, and ironically, it's one of the low-tier units that is the biggest threat to the Numenorean line. And we're going to see why in just a moment here. There's Rohirrim Spearman winding up a javelin volley. Rohan Marines not really prepared for it. They do have formidable armor and shield values, but it's still going to hurt. And these are the kind of shock tactics that can be incredibly powerful against Numenor. If you can leverage burst damage against Numenor, you have a solid opportunity to win that battle. Numenor can't take damage very, very quickly, and they can't replace their casualties as easily as other factions like, say, Misty or even Rohan in this instance can. Alcarondas Legion looking to take a bite out of the Shield Maidens of Eowyn. Again, it's the Rohan Marines being targeted. You're going to see that a lot. They're an extremely powerful unit. And Numenor has some other infantry units that they can use in lieu of the Romana Marines. Ooh, Eastmark Spearmen tossing straight on into the Romana Marksmen, backing up the Alcarondas Legion. Point-blank volleys. Now they're going to turn their attention onto the Romana Marines. Again, this unit taking it on the chin that time, not taking quite so much damage. I think they might also be going after the Numenorean Sentinels over here in the center. Let's go ahead and actually turn things down a little bit to about 0.6. Numenorean Sentinels charging into the Eastmark Spearmen over here, now out of ammunition, having done their job. These pikemen are going to close ranks with them, and these Eastmark Spearmen are going to be pretty hard pressed to hold them back. This is a fight that does not seem to be going very much in Rohan's favor. Numenor has kind of soaked up the initial burst damage with loose formation and waves of attack and tying down some of the more important skirmish units from the Rohirrim line. And they're in a pretty good fight if they can just pick an infantry one-to-one kind of engagement. Then they're going to be able to come out on top of a Rohan 9 times out of 10. That being said, we do have some shield maidens of Eowyn here that are well poised to deliver some devastating, enfilading fire into the Alcarondas Legion and the Romana Marksmen. That would be absolutely devastating. Right now, they're in the process of dismantling the Westmark Marshals, who didn't get their charge off, which is a critical component of using your shock troops. Pretty nasty situation for those Westmark Marshals to be in. Meanwhile, over here, Numenorean Shield Guard going toe-to-toe with the Westmark Spearmen. I would give that to the Numenorean Shield Guard, even with their lower numbers. Let's see what we have going on over here. Ooh, the Rohirrim Cavalry kind of just out in the open. Not very good micro here on the part of Grimm. All of his cavalry just kind of sitting there, and Startling is able to shower them down. And I think there's also some Temple Guard who are firing at the Aerid not Aerid of Aldburg. Yeah, that's what it is. The Aerid of Aldburg. Meanwhile, over here, the Red Shield of Erkenbrand have been heavily reduced. You can see those iconic red horses dead all over the fields. Over here, Second Pink sending some cavalry to the rescue of his ally, Rohan. At the very least, he's going to be able to inflict some pretty serious damage upon the forces of Numenor with their javelins. They are exceptionally good at doing that. Sons of Eorl kind of just away from the fight, which is not where they need to be. Meanwhile, the rest of the Rohirrim infantry is suffering quite grievously at the hands of Numenor. This is the kind of fight that Numenor likes, and they're going to win pretty well 9 times out of 10, like I said. Meanwhile, over here in the center, it seems to be all quiet on the western front for the most part. We have some forces of Dale that are maneuvering themselves onto in a position where they could easily launch attacks against Peak, extending their line, maybe trying to stretch the Numenoreans a little bit thin, given their small numbers. Not a bad idea. Meanwhile, Rhudaur, it seems, is going to move over and support them. No, actually, Rhudaur is being a little bit static right now. Peak has not really moved too far from where he's been for the last 4,000 or so frames, so it'll be interesting to see what he decides to do when he decides to commit, because I think that if both of them were to swarm against Peak, it would be very, very simple for them, especially with Rhudaur, with those thrown weapons, with the Troll Hunters and the Axe Throwers. It would be very, very easy for them to overwhelm this small but elite force of Numenorean infantry and inflict some pretty serious damage on them, and then still have enough left over to deal with Starling's forces, who admittedly are a little bit more numerous. Let's see what we got going on over here. It looks like some Rhudaur cavalry tried to take a piece out of the Romana Marines. Didn't work out very well for them. Alcaronda's faithful sunk their talons in, and that was pretty well the end. But if they can defeat Pink quickly, then they will be able to swarm against Starling, possibly surround him, maybe use some of their hand-thrown missile units and crush him ultimately. But it's going to be hard to say. Oh, there goes the Rohirrim general. But it's going to be hard to say while they're being so static. They definitely need to move as quickly as possible. Time is against them. Rohan is suffering very, very grievously here at the hands of Numenor. It looks like some of those maidens getting a nice, beautiful angle here. Enfilading fire into the Romana Marines. You can see that they've absolutely devastated them. That's a lot of killing power from the Numenorean roster. Mistakes like that can cost you as Numenor. You can't get overconfident with them. You definitely want to try and protect units like your Marines as much as possible. You want to try and keep them in the fight for as long as you can, because they are just so useful. Shield Maidens of Eowyn now out of ammunition, closing in on the Romana Marines, looking to silence them for good. It's kicked out to full speed now. Over here, there are pockets where Rohan seems to be fighting their way through the Numenoreans. Now Sentinels apparently losing against the Spearmen, but so far they've butchered pretty well most of them, and I don't think they've lost too much in return. I think they had about 36 when we looked last. Over here, the Numenorean phalanx still intact, and the Rohirrim are paying the price. for coming up against some of the best infantry available in Middle-earth. Certainly the best human infantry in the game, bar none. This is not the kind of fight that Rohan wanted to pick, but unfortunately their cavalry was wiped out early. And now all they have left to do is fall back on their infantry. And the Rohirrim are not weak in melee, in an infantry fight, I should say, in patch 0.97. But Numenor is just so far their superior. It's almost a little bit tragic. Meanwhile, the Numenorean reserve still more or less intact. Got some Romena marksmen, some temple guards still looking very healthy. At least one very strong unit of Romena sentinels. Eastmark spearmen being routed now by the Romena marines. This surround is taking its toll on the remaining forces of Rohan. Over here, some cavalry support hacking down the shield maidens of Eowyn, evening this fight out between them and the Romena marines. Got some Numenorean lancers from Peak over here, all the way from across the fields. Ooh, a rear charge by the Eldolande nobles into the Westmark marshals, going to rout them. Westmark spearmen coming in from the rear against these Romena sentinels. I don't think it's going to matter. Those sentinels will be able to just turn around and butcher those guys. Red Shield of Erkenbrand getting caught out, trying to get away, doing their best, but I think we're going to see them break here. Oh, it looks like they are going to slip out of the that grave that Numenor just tried to dig for them with the Eldolande nobles and the Numenorean lancers. But I don't really know if Rohan has a whole lot left over. I don't know where their knights are. I think it's fair to say that most of Rohan forces are dead. This may be the only thing that they have left. These 14 Red Shield of Erkenbrand. Meanwhile, Starling is now marching to the aid of his ally as Dale tries to move forward and isolate Peak. Now would be a very good time for Second Pink to move forward, and I think he recognizes this. And you can see him moving to try and catch Starling while he's disorganized and on the march, which is a really good idea. We've seen what the Numenorean infantry can do. I'm sure the players at this point, they've had a few games against Numenor. They do have some respect for the infantry, and yeah. Which is probably why he wants to try and catch him at a disadvantage, if at all possible, because going up straight against Numenor is going to be a very ugly affair in many cases. Let's see, we got here some Numenorean lancers. Charging forward, the Rhudaur swordsmen and the axe throwers got far too close without the support of their pikes. Second Pink trying to make up for it, but the arrows are pouring in, and this is going to buy Numenor some precious time to fire off a couple more volleys with those Romena marksmen up there waiting on the hill. A lot of dead Rhudaur soldiers. The bastard children of Numenor trying to step to their dear old dad. It does not seem to be working out so well for Pink so far. That being said, he does have the numbers to soak up this fire. Romena marksmen now retreating, and it's going to be down to the Romena marines. And these are the kind of tactics I expect to see a lot as Numenor. It's probably the most effective way to play them. Try and chunk off a little bit of your enemy's health with your missile units before you engage them in close quarters, where your highly skilled and disciplined infantry will be able to win, usually assuming you pick the right engagement. Coldfell Marines, however, charging into the Romena Marines, silencing them, giving Pink an opportunity to get in there with his pikes, which the Romena Marines are not going to have an answer to if they can't toss their javelins before engaging. Ooh, a devastating volley there into the Herenadine pikemen, claiming the lives of many of these fallen Dunedain. The Romena Marines here from Numenor just giving their wayward son a good paddling. Trollshaw axe throwers now returning fire against the Romena Marines. Pikemen moving forward to support the front line. More Romena Marines falling back. Really great tactics here on the part of Starling. You gotta hand it to him. This is exactly how Numenor needs to be played. You need to be organized, you need to be deliberate, and you need to leverage your missile units to even out the numbers disparity. Meanwhile, over here, got some Numenorean lancers from Starling taking a bite out of these Rhudaur swordsmen. They've hacked down quite a lot of them. They are going to need to get out of there quite quickly, as Creed is inbound. Got some Lake Town pikemen there, and I think Starling sees the mortal danger that those Numenorean lancers are in, and they're going to flee. Over here, Romena Marines from Peak, out of ammunition, having done what damage they can. They're going to charge straight into the Lake Town pikemen. Not something I normally advise, at least not in this block formation. If you are going to attack pikes, at least try to surround them. Don't take them head on like this. That being said, the Romena Marines have high skill, they have high armor. They'll be able to stand up to that for quite a while, even though they won't be able to get a ton of kills against the pikes. Meanwhile, over here at Lake Town River Patrol doing what they do best. taking some pot shots here at the Alcarondas Legion. Did they knock some of them over? Do they have, like, special Trollman javelins? Do I have to fix that? Ooh. A lot of those Alcarondas Legion getting cut down. That's a tremendous amount of value for the Lake Town River Patrol to bring. Look at that. Nearly half the unit. Another devastating volley coming in. More Lake Town Patrol. Really giving these Alcarondas Legion what for. Certainly paid for themselves at this point with the damage that they've done to the Alcarondas Legion. Now over here in the center, Barding Herd running afoul of the Alcarondas Legion, supporting the Rometa Sentinels. A ton of Greenwood Lumbermen with their armor piercing, backed up with some Barding Herds, have this wing of Numenor completely surrounded. The Royal Legion of Armenelos in there alongside the Marines, trying to keep them together, trying to hold the Thangale fast. But for how long? Especially with these Barding Herd, who are well poised to sandwich this line, coming from the rear, pincer them, and destroy them. There are some reinforcements nearby, however, a big old blob of Numenorean pikes and infantry from Alcarondas Legion, along with a large number of Rometa Sentinels. Back lines are compromised, however. We got some Dalian cavalry running roughshod all over the Rometa marksmen. Things are looking pretty tough for Peak, and consequently for Starling. If they can crush Peak quickly, I've said it a million times, and I'm going to say it again. If they can crush him quickly, or at the very least, circumvent part of Peak's forces and come in from the rear against Starling, they're going to have a great time. There's a ton of pikemen here. Rhudaur has the numbers to hold up Numenor for a very long time, and it seems to be that they are actually beating them in a straight fight, which is very surprising and largely due to the numbers. If we just look at the disparity here between the forces of Rhudaur, just look at the brown and the black. Numenor seems to be in a little bit of trouble, but they are holding fast. That being said, Rhudaur swordsmen now flanking in behind this phalanx. It's going to be down to the Temple Guard to try and shut this down before the situation becomes critical. Over here, Rometa Marines cutting down the Dunman pikemen. Have some reinforcements from Lango, who have finally arrived on scene after destroying Rohan. Now the Numenorians from the victorious Numenorians from the other side of the field are here to support Starling, and it seems like things are going to go well for Numenor here. That being said, they are in trouble in the center. The superior numbers of Rhudaur and their huge amount of pikes are taking their toll. Down here, defeat seems certain. We've even got some Numenorian forces on the verge of routing. I think a lot of that has to do with the Witch Roman Slavers. Don't know if I mentioned them in the army composition phase, but they are nearby. Armor piercing, absolutely deadly, and they are fear causing. This is a section of Starling's line that is in most danger of collapse. Meanwhile, over here, Second Pink trying to help out his ally Dale as much as he can. Starling throwing some of his Rometa Marines under the bus to try and hold them back. Over here, the Rometa Marines still fighting against the Lake Town Spearmen, or the Lake Town Pikemen rather, and Lake Town Pikemen are going to win that fight. Over here, Numenorean Lancers from Peak trying to shut down the formidable Bardian skirmish line. At least prevent them from firing for a little while longer. Meanwhile, Starling has, looks like he's combined his forces with that of Peak. Got some Shadow Guard here from Peak, as well as another company of Rometa Marksmen, and they are trying to go toe-to-toe with the Bardian Marksmen, at least preventing them from supporting the Rhudaur forces with some enfilading fire and potentially causing things to get disastrous for the Numenorians really quickly. Over here, River Patrol, Barding Herd doing their best. They've certainly done a number on the Numenorian forces so far. However, Peak's reinforcements have come in like a wrecking ball. These Greenwood Lumbermen are really taking it on the chin. There are some supporting units nearby, a couple units of Dalian Marksmen well positioned to fire pretty well into the rear and side of this Numenorian blob. But the Numenorians are all upgraded, except for the Alcarondas Legion, who can't upgrade currently. But the Rometa Sentinels will be able to stand up to that for quite a long period of time. Certainly long enough, I think, for the Numenorians to hack their way through the remaining Dalish infantry. Let's see what we got here. Some Numenorian Lancers. Rear charge here against the Bardian Marksmen, who are certainly getting the better of Peak's Numenorians in the center. Absolute chaos and bedlam. Go ahead, kick it up to 1x speed. Yeah, the Numenorians in the center are certainly... They're in a lot of danger of being overwhelmed, although with that extra cavalry support, they might just be able to hold on a little bit longer. We got over here, Lake Town River Patrol and these Bardian Marksmen getting targeted down by the Rangers. Lake Town River Patrol certainly in danger from that. Bardian Marksmen will be able to stand up to it from the front. A great deal better than the lightly armored units. But the Numenorean cavalry really exacting a terrible toll from these Bardian reinforcements as they try to just find somewhere where they'll be useful on the battlefield. Starling now moving over with a number of his missile units, getting them into one big blob, preparing for some serious DPS. But it doesn't look like Creed is going to allow him the opportunity. Got some Numenorean Shadow Guard out in front here, about to be disrupted by the Bardian Marksman. I think the rest of the unit is about to do the same. They should quickly overrun those Numenorean Shadow Guard and get themselves into the Romantic Marksman, and at the very least stop them from firing. It seems like, actually, Starling's intent is to rain death down upon the Rhudaur forces, who are much more lightly armored and are currently defeating his forces up here on the hill. Ooh, man, it looks like a lot of the Rhudaur army. I say that they were defeating the Numenorians, but it seems like most of their army has melted away. Largely due, I would expect, to the flanking movement by Lango. Very timely intervention, just as Starling was really beginning to struggle. 2 units of Temple Guard here, charging in. I believe they cause fear. And that might be enough to cause some breaking and send the rest of the Rhudaur forces fleeing from the battlefield. So it seems like Numenor is going to be able to stand up to one of their rebellious sons. Although only by a hair and only with the timely intervention of their ally. Meanwhile, back on this side, got the Witch Realm and Slavers disrupting this entire skirmish line from Starling. Well played here on the part of Second Pink. And this is one of the dangers of having all of your skirmishers together, basically putting all of your eggs into a single basket. So Romantic Marksmen are now vulnerable to being hacked to bits by these Witch Realm and Slavers, and that's a lot of damage from Starling's Numenorean forces that aren't currently doing anything. Bardian Marksmen, very close to victory, taking on some Romantic Marksmen and a skeleton crew from the Alcarondes Legion. What do we have over here? Dalian Marksmen fighting against the Romantic Sentinels. They're going to have no problem. These marksmen over here, however, are doing far better in toe-to-toe against the Alcarondes Legion, and you can hardly blame them. The Alcarondes, they are outnumbered 2-to-1 in this kind of context. Skilled warriors though they are, the Dalian marksmen are no joke in melee with their axes as well. So we got over here some Greenwood Lumbermen charging in here again in support of the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, who are now fighting one-on-one, more or less, with the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Got a few Numenorians here as well, tasting the mighty steel of the legendary Blackshot Dragon Slayers. And that's anybody's game at this point, though I think with the support of the Armenelos Legion, the Numenorian forces are going to get the better of them. Over here, Lake Town Pikemen still beating down these Romantic Marines. Romantic Marines having only inflicted some fairly light casualties. Meanwhile, the second unit of Romantic Marines has managed to rout, along with Starling's remaining forces in the center, they've managed to rout what remains of the Rhudaur army. And it seems like Second Pink is well and truly out of the game. While the Numenorians now up here on the hill, some of them from Lango, some of them from Starling. They're moving down to assist their ally Peak, who is really struggling for a while. Lake Town Pikemen now fleeing in the face of renewed Numenorian assault. Peak's Romantic Marines going to come out of that as the winners after all. We have to admit defeat there, I presume, from Second Pink. Creed is still holding on. And those Bardian Marksmen, look at this. The Bardian Marksmen is kind of a testament to how much they've grown since the last patch, in that they can stand toe-to-toe with the Romantic Marines and still be beating them. Oh, I say that, and now they're starting to come under some fire from the rear from Starling's Romantic Marksmen. And this is going to be all she wrote. I think this is the last bastion of Dalish strength still in the field that's still holding firm, except for perhaps the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. It's only a matter of time before those marksmen ultimately fall. Got some, what do we have over here? Some Temple Guard. Fear-causing unit charging into the rear of the Bardian Marksmen. This is going to be game over, I think, for these remaining heavy infantry. Oh man, complete chaos. Those Bardian Marksmen are not long for this world. Meanwhile, over here, what do we got? Blackshot Dragon Slayers taking on some seriously overwhelming odds. He's going to get that Alcarondes Legionnaire. Doesn't look like it. Let's see who gets who. think these guys are still in defensive formation, which is definitely not where they need to be when they're in melee. So a bit of a mistake there on the part of Creed. Oh, and there they go. The Legionnaires, in tandem with the Romena Sentinels, have destroyed the most of the few remaining Blackshot Dragon Slayers. And I think that's going to be it right there. 76 to 78, a really good game. Sound tactics on the part of the Numenorean players. Obviously, they are very veteran, so they know what they are doing, but I was particularly impressed with how Starling used his Numenorean army to thin out the ranks of Rhudaur before he engaged. If he hadn't have done that, or if those units had simply gotten shut down earlier on, I don't know if Starling would have been able to come out on top. Primarily, actually just due entirely to the sheer numbers that the Rhudaur forces were able to bring to bear against their line. Rhudaur pikemen here, about to be overwhelmed. I thought Second Pink was gone for good, but he's still back. Still haunting the battlefield with this skeleton crew of Rhudaur pikemen. And that's game over. Very, very solid play on the part of the Numenorean players. You gotta hand it to them. Since there's about 20% of their forces left, but when you look at it, it's really not that much. A handful of men. Some Romena Sentinels here, a couple of units mixed in together. Some more Romena units over here, rightly celebrating a hard-won victory. Let's go ahead and fast forward things a little bit here. I don't think there's anything left from Dale at this point. Ah, I see. It's the Angmar enslavers. I'm curious. Curious where they are. It must be over here. Really giving it, even to the Temple Guard. The Temple Guard can't stand against the fury of these black Numenoreans. Ooh. Another Numenorean falls. Just trying to hack his way out. Just can't, though. See if he gets that Temple Executioner. I think it's just an officer from the Temple Guard. Oh, there goes now Carondas Legionnaire. This mad berserker. Is no one going to be able to stop him? What about that Numenorean? That Numenorean Lancer. I mean, they're all Numenoreans. And there you have it. A solid victory. Well played on the part of Numenor. Let's take a look at the damage those Witch Realm Enslavers did. Just absolute monsters. The rest of Peak's army did not do quite so well, and I think a lot of that is due primarily to the Numenorean skirmish line. He didn't have any skirmishers to stop them. It was a full infantry rush, and ultimately he kind of paid the price for it. But those Witch Realm Enslavers, look at that. They're like, how many kills did he get total? A little bit less than a third of his total kills. Very impressive from a single unit. The Numenoreans all did very well. You can see kind of the numbers that you can expect from a Numenorean faction, even when it seemed like there was a ton of them. There really, really isn't. So I think the Numenor is an interesting faction, and I think that this battle exemplifies in a lot of ways how you need to play them. There was a lot of opportunity for things to go terribly, terribly wrong for the Numenorians, especially with the Javelin forces that Second Pink was able to bring to bear, the Javelins from Grimm, and just the sheer skirmishing power that Creed has could potentially be a big problem for them, because they can't take those casualties. They can't take shock damage. They can't absorb javelins and throwing axes the way that other factions can. So it's kind of interesting. Shows off Numenor, but what do you guys say to one more battle? I think that might be a lot of fun. So I'll see you guys in just a few moments. All right, strap in, because this one is going to be a doozy. It is kind of a what-if scenario. What if Isildur was able to prepare himself instead of being ambushed during the Battle of Gladden Fields? What if he had a full army with him to take on the forces of Mordor, who are trying to take the ring back for Sauron, their master? Well, let's find out. Today we've got a couple of Numenor armies squaring off against 3 Mordor armies. First one is commanded by Lango. He's got a ton of Romena Marines, no armor upgrades on them, however. Also got a bunch of Romena Sentinels forming his second line, and it seems like Peak is going to be the one who is on the front lines today. He's got another ally as well, We'll get into him in just a moment. Romana Sentinels, Narunara Sentinels, blocking off this critical wing here. 2 units of cavalry in the form of 1 unit of Eldolande Nobles and 1 unit of Alcarondas Faithful. Mordor doesn't have a ton of cavalry, but much like Numenor, their cavalry is very elite, but low in number. Lango also brings some of the Temple Executioners. Let's get a really good look at their new helmets. I think they look damn fine. They almost look like something out of Destiny, like they're a warlock. Which, you know, kind of fitting, I suppose, for the Temple Executioners. In any case, Romana Marksmen, got some Eldolande Swordmasters here. 2 units of Eldolande Swordmasters being held in reserve. Going to be an important anti-infantry tool once Mordor crashes into their lines. More Romana Marksmen, and we've got some Alcarondas Legion here forming a 3rd and final line of defense. If we move on over here, we have the Army of Sin of the Dark Cloud, one of the lead developers and the creator of the Numenor faction. He's got, I believe, 4 units of the Alcarondas Legion, a ton of these guys. Not very numerous, but damn do they hold the line. A couple units of Numenorean Shield Guard, 1 unit of Temple Guard. He's got some Shadow Rangers in there as well. A bunch of Romana Marksmen, and a ton of Romana Marines, who I believe have, I think all of his Romana units have an armor upgrade as well. So Romana Sentinels, Romana Marines, and the Romana Marksmen, all the bread and butter of the Numenorean infantry line. 1 unit of Alcarondas Faithful, so a 3rd unit of cavalry to throw into the mix. And finally, last but not least, we have the majestic Royal Legion of Armenelos. I would like to remind you guys, this is not the final product for this model. It's actually going to get even cooler looking. So if you guys want to see that, get another sneak preview, I recommend you go over to the ModDB page. And I'm mentioning this because I want to lead into this for a second time. Head over to ModDB if you like the battle that you just saw and the Numenorean roster breakdown that we've seen so far. I would like to remind you to head over to ModDB and vote for us for Mod of the Year. We've been working very hard this year, and we would love to have your guys' support and to try and make it into the top 3 this year. Last year we were in the top 4, which was damn fine, but this year we're going to try and be a little bit more ambitious and reach for that top 3 spot. So any support you guys can give us would be very much appreciated. But in any case, I think that just about does it for Sin of the Dark Cloud's army. Let's go ahead and get this battle started. And by get this battle started, I mean go ahead and take a look at some of the Mordor army compositions. We have Peak here, you'll recognize from the last battle. We got some Orc Fodder Spearmen, some Orc Archers. I think the Orc Archers are currently invisible because of some mesh problem that they're having. I got some other Orc Archers over here, Orc Fodder, a bunch of Moradon Guards. Actually, that's from Starling's army, so let's go ahead and try and pick out which elements belong to Peak. Got some Moradon Halberds, a bunch of Savages of Charcost, of Karchost, or the Karchost? I can't remember. My Elvish is terrible. Forgive me. But they are previously known as Orc Savages, so they are shock troops. Got some Moradon Halberds, so many Moradon Halberds. Melkor's Chosen, who also have the new look. They've got some horns in addition too, so they'll be keeping the horns. It's a lot of stuff to have on your head, though. Ooh, man, their necks must get tired. Got some Moradon Halberds here in behind them, and a little bit of a bug here with the Nazgul General that rides with the Melkor Chosen, which is coincidentally the Mordor General, not simply an officer. He actually runs along on top of his Karagor, which is strange. Again, this is a test batch. We're fixing these things. More Savages of Charcost, some Orc Javelins. I think we got a couple companies of Orc Javelins here from Peak today. Sauron's Will. And there they are. So there's the second unit. And some Olokai. I love the Olokai. Let's just take a moment and enjoy the high-quality model. I mean, this is on a 10, 12-year-old game engine. That looks damn good. And I think we have another company here of the Sauron's Will. Let's move on now to the second Mordor army. We have the army of Kurogurochan, another one of the lead developers. He's brought himself a Troll Catapult. Got some Orc Fodder, Midas Morgul Chosen, some Moradon Guard, which is a reskin for the Moradon Guard unit, and of course their stats have been adjusted accordingly to fit their mainline infantry status and not simply a militia tier unit. And yeah, they look like the other Moradon units, so kind of cool there. Orc Javelins, going to be important against Numenor. Orc Halberds. I think a lot of these polar units are really going to struggle against the pikes because the pikes outrange the halberds. Halberds will outrange your regular run-of-the-mill sword and board and spear infantry. However, they are outranged themselves by pikes. This is going to be a lot of meat for the grinder that is Numenor. Over here, we got some Numenorean Lancers with their green cloaks and their sorceress green and kind of sickly gunmetal gray appearance. They do come from the Tower of Sorcery in Mordor. Is that what it's called? The Tower of Sorcery? Minas Morgul. I think it's like City of Dark Sorcery, something like that, because Morgul, I'm pretty sure, is Black Sorcery. In any case, got some more halberds here, and I think that just about does it for Grochan's army. I don't think he has any trolls. One of his troll catapults lagging a little bit behind, a couple of units of Mordor archers in the back there. Moving on now to the third and final Mordor army, we have the army of Starling. He's got some Numenorean Lancers here, Castellans of Durthang, which are previously known as the Mounted Temple Inquisitors, something like that. Of course, they get the new model. You can see the difference between them and the Numenorean variant. Got some Melkor's Chosen. Over here, a bunch of Black Legion, going to be important for pushing their way through the Numenorean phalanx. That's going to be instrumental for helping units like the Halberds get their work done. You got some Mordor on guard here, a lot of spear units. Again, shield wall in those units will be important for pushing their way through the Numenoreans. Got some Orc Javelins and some Orc Fodder. I think that just about does it for the Numenoreans. Or rather, I keep calling Mordor the Numenoreans. That's just terrible. I don't know what's wrong with me. Well, what do you know? We missed a unit of Temple Guard over here as well, which also belongs to Starling Army. But I think that now does it officially for the army comps. Let's start this battle. And here we are. Behold the host of Numenor entrenched at the end of this valley. Meanwhile, the storm of Sauron's forces are bearing down on them as an eerie silence settles its way across the valley. That silence is, however, soon to be broken. You can see some Numenorean cavalry under Mordor, some Melkor's Chosen, you got some Castellans of Durthang, and I think a company of Numenorean Lancers in support charging their way towards their counterparts across the way. Isildur's Numenoreans are going to clash with their fallen brothers here up on this hill, as Melkor's Chosen and Castellans of Durthang go toe-to-toe with the Alcarondas faithful and the Eldolande nobles. It really does seem a shame here, the flower of Numenor tearing itself apart as these two elite forces of cavalry really just hack each other to tiny bits. It's going to be an interesting fight. The Eldolande nobles are not melee knights, they are simply a melee bodyguard, which is a new bodyguard type that we've recently added. So against the Melkor's Chosen, they are going to be hard-pressed, certainly stretched to their limits of what they can do. Formidable warriors though they may be, the Melkor's Chosen are simply the greater. They are being helped a little bit by this hill advantage. Meanwhile, down here, a little bit farther down the hill, the Alcarondas faithful seem to be having some troubles here, struggling against Castellans of Durthang and their superior numbers and those very quick two-handed animations. Although it seems like slowly but surely they are pulling it back, the Alcarondas faithful giving no ground here and progressively cutting down more and more of those Castellans. Meanwhile, over here, we got a couple invisible companies of Orcish archers. One of them not long for this world. You can see the Numenoreans just kind of practicing. Just a little bit of target practice here. Oh, there goes the Mordor general. One of the Mordor general must be the force from Starling, getting hacked down by one of the Eldolande nobles. But this is just a taste of the fury that Mordor is poised to unleash. Peak is already on his way. Starling is forming up with a vanguard here of Black Legion to try and push his way through the pike wall and Thangale of Numenor. Ooh, it seems like the Alcarondas faithful have really evened out this fight. Castellans of Durthang now down to 21. See how the Eldolande nobles doing. 14 against 20 of the Melkor's Chosen. This is going to be disastrous for everybody involved. Another one getting hacked down by the Bannermen. And now I think might be a good time to try and pull back. Certainly have some enemy in their rear now. Got some Orc fodder coming up here, and they might just surround and destroy the Alcarondas faithful before they have an opportunity to hack down the remaining Castellans of Durthang and come to the aid of their beleaguered Eldolande noble counterparts a little bit farther up the hill. But now the only channel of escape has been closed by Peak. The only way out is through a wall of spears. I think Lango should have pulled back a little bit earlier, but they seem keen to fight their their fallen Numenorean counterparts to the death. Faithful down to 12, with the Castellans down to 14. I don't think this is a fight the Castellans are going to win. See what kind of cavalry that Mordor has left, however. 2 Numenorean Lancers, and I think another company of the Melkor's Chosen, possibly. Losing their cavalry like this, the Numenoreans that is, losing them in this fight when I don't feel like they need to. They could just have some small units of elite cavalry left over that they could get a lot of use out of. If the wall breaks, if Starling is able to batter through with the Black Legion and his allies are able to follow him up, there is going to be hell to pay. There's going to be a ton of Numenorean Lancers that are able to get behind the lines and cause a whole lot of trouble. And that eventuality can certainly be either avoided or the impact be lessened with the addition of some extra units of cavalry that they can use to at least block, maybe tie up those charges, at the very least stop them from happening. So this could have some implications. This early engagement here could have some implications that percolate onto the end of the battle. Although the nobles looking like they're going to fight to the death here, down to a meager 5. Managed to take down 6 of the Melkor's Chosen in turn. Oh, look at this guy. Outnumbered and alone. Fighting hard against his fallen Numenoreans. Oh, and he is struck down. Alcaranda's faithful coming in from the rear, looking like they want to shut down the Melkor's Chosen completely. This is the hill that they have chosen to die on, figuratively and literally. Orc fodder making their way around the line. This is a big mistake on the part of Numenor. Allowing these orc fodder into the back at the very least prevents the Romena Marines from firing their javelins. And at the same time, we have a general charge here from Mordor. Some javelins coming in from the orc javelins. Orc fodder, tired, charging their way into the Numenorean phalanx. That's going to be no problem. The Numenoreans will make the Mordor forces pay at least 3-1 in this kind of exchange. But it is going to be all too cheap. Well, let's get one more volley. I really like this. I love this as a screenshot. I wish I got the volley flying overhead, but that's alright. Mordor forces charging in. The Numenoreans are meeting them with steel. And you got some early routing here. Some of the orc fodder, of course, can be the first to flee. Look at the damage they did to that first wave of halberds. Romena Marines perfectly placed to do what they do best. It's over here, however, on the wing, where things are looking very difficult indeed. This is where the Olokai have been committed. The Numenoreans are under heavy attack, and look at this. Some Melkor's Chosen have made it through the lines. They're being focused down with everything that the Numenoreans can bring against them. Oh, that charge! They're just gonna slip by the leaguer that Sin the Darkcloud had set for them. Starling is going to charge them down here, trying to inflict the maximum amount of casualties. Ooh, those Melkor's Chosen. On the verge of routing, however, alone and behind enemy lines, they are going to break. And the Numenoreans are going to have a bit of a field day here, hacking down these Melkor's Chosen as vengeance for their fallen brothers. Alvalande's Swordmasters luckily came out of that scrap pretty well unharmed. Narnar Sentinels here as well. I would certainly bring the Sentinels here a little bit farther forward to try and close up this gap. Lango moving forward with his Marines. Now out of ammunition. Silencing the Orc Javelins. Melkor's Chosen running in through the back. They're in a very bad position indeed. Another company of Melkor's Chosen under peak have made their way behind the lines, and this is ugly. I do not know why the Numenoreans left this wing so wide open, but Mordor is really taking advantage of it. Black Watch Legion now widening the gap ever so much more. And Mordor orcs are just pouring through. The Numenoreans are struggling to mobilize their reserves fast enough to stop this from happening. Got some more Romena Marines here trying to staunch the bleeding. Black Legion of Numenor about to have a very bad day. Javelins and more Numenoreans pouring into the gap to try and hold the line. So far, a fairly even fight, with the Numenoreans just slightly ahead by 5%. Sauron's Will charging into the Romena marksmen, being used as a makeshift second line. Yeah, that's what they're good for. Sauron's Will, I don't know how well they're going to do here. Some Melkor's Chosen, 31 of them trying to muscle their way through. Spears are needed. Some Romena Sentinels from Lango being mobilized. That's Romena marksmen nearby as well. Some Romena Marines routing, 58 men in the unit. Very surprising. I think that a lot of that has to do with the Melkor's Chosen, who are still so healthy and launching these guerrilla attacks on the Numenorean back lines. This is a disaster for Numenor. Lango needs to get forward and get forward quickly, but I don't think he's going to be able to do it quickly enough. These Romena marksmen, Going to get charged down by the Melkor's Chosen. Not as devastating of a charge as it could have been, but still, this is not ideal. There is an opportunity here. Certainly a big opportunity to try and catch these Melkor's Chosen up on the hill with nowhere left to go. Our now Sentinels being hindered by the fact that they are being shot by the Orcish ranged forces, giving it everything they got. Momentum Marksmen getting charged again by the Melkor's Chosen. It seems like they've seen a gap here in the Numenorean lines. Eldolande Swordmasters trying to get a piece. But again, the Numenorians just too slow. Ooh, a nice javelin volley there into the Melkor's Chosen. Unfortunately, most of them didn't hit. Not as devastating and as game-changing as it could have been. But again, the Melkor's Chosen going to try and get out of there. One thing to note about the Momentum Marines is that they do have a small bonus versus cavalry, and more, even larger against elephants. Just as a bit of a deterrent for elephants and for cavalry units that can be a big problem for the Numenorean line. Melkor's Chosen, however, deftly skirting away. These Momentum Marines coming under fire now. I'm not too sure from what. Temple Guard up there on the hill, I believe. Well, the poor Temple Executioners getting charged down by the Melkor's Chosen. I do not know why their cavalry has not been mobilized like yesterday. Alcaronda's Faithful getting a nice frontal charge into the Melkor's Chosen. Peak's going to try and get away. It's going to cost him, though. At least, ooh, nearly half the unit there. A nice countercharge by Alcaronda's Faithful. But again, if there was that cavalry behind the lines, this would not have been a problem. It would have been child's play for Sin and his ally Lango to catch these Melkor's Chosen and surround them. Ooh, another countercharge here into the rear. Going to cut down a few more of the Melkor's Chosen. But they are going to escape again. And they're going to circle back to be a big problem for Numenor, where they have just a sea of troubles already. Momentum Marksmen fighting hard against the Morgul's Chosen. They are going to win that fight eventually. Ranged fire support coming down to try and assist this beleaguered section of the Numenorean phalanx. Over here, it's been broken, and the Numenorian forces have been cut off from their brothers. Oh, well, actually, it is kind of a contiguous line, but it is bulging under the weight of this Mordor assault. Meanwhile, down in the valley, some Numenorian forces from Sin of the Dark Cloud are being pulled off, but this is a problem. There's some Numenorian Lancers nearby. It could have been so simple simply to use the Alcaronda's Legion, for example, to move over here and reinforce the Mordor forces, try and grind them down directly. Instead, Sin of the Dark Cloud is breaking off his lines, and Starling is going to immediately jump on this opportunity to charge forward with his Numenorean Lancers. And the Melkor's Chosen are not dead yet. There's still 13 of them. Oh, this is really unfortunate. A nice rear charge here by the Numenorean Lancers into their Numenorean brothers. And that's actually going to claim the lives of some of the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Sin of the Dark Cloud not too far behind. Going to get a nice piece of the Numenorean Lancers. Not going to be enough to cripple them, though. And this is why I think that breaking off from the valley was a little bit premature. There are some Temple Guard up here that could be mobilized as well. Brought down here to try and shoot the Numenorean Lancers to pieces. That would certainly, I would do that solely because I know that they would go after the Temple Guard immediately, and that's something that I can be prepared for. Something that I can use to my advantage when I know that they are going to be in a certain area. But instead, they are out of range and just kind of sitting up there for the time being. And they don't actually have fire at will on, so they do have an opportunity to shoot these Numenorian Lancers here, at least cut down some of them. There's not very many left, but seems like there's some micro issues here and some communication issues on the part of the Numenorean side. That being said, the damage they have done to Mordor is just catastrophic. 57 so far to 62. Still about 5% difference, but so many dead orcs, and you can see more routing happening here. That's going to tilt the percentages. Momentum Marines charging into these orc javelins, trying to silence them. They're going to get a piece, but Kuro Goro-chan is going to fall back, and that's going to bring those Momentum Marines within range of some of the Temple Guard up here. A lot of Temple Guard on the side of Mordor, and that can be a big problem for Numenor, who relies very heavily on their armor. What do we got over here? The Alcaronda's Faithful charging into the rear of some Mordor units, managing to break them. I don't know if that's a good idea. These Melkor's Chosen are still around, still being a problem. I would certainly want to get rid of them before anything else. Over here, the Numenoreans being battered. The Romena Marines taking javelin volley after javelin volley. Temple Guard also firing down against them. Is that 2 units Temple Guard up there? Maybe just one that's really spread out. Another company from Starling moving forward to try and break this Numenorean wing where it is at its weakest. Eldolande Swordmasters surrounded on all sides. Doing their best, hacking through the orcs. Slaying them this way and that, but there are always more. Always another orc that pops up to take the place of the fallen. And this is looking grim for Numenor. They are still very strong down here. But I don't think it's going to be enough. Got some sentinels. Sentinels pushing against these units, but I think a lot of them are still in defensive formation, whereas now would be a good time to push, yes, even with your pikes. Inflict those casualties on the orcs who are now very tired. Make them rout, cause the mass rout down here in the valley, sweep this force away, and then move up the hill to support your warriors who are just horribly outnumbered. That's certainly the strategy that I would try to employ in this case. Oh man, the Temple Guard proving to be more than a match from the Romena Marines. Got some Numenorean Shadow Guard now out of ammunition moving forward. They are no slouch in melee either. Decent armor values to boot. Some Temple Guard from Set of the Dark Cloud being brought forward to counter the menace of the Mordor Temple Guard. More orcish reinforcements moving in. Got some javelins here under Kuroguroshan. Moving forward, using the general bedlam of the fight here as cover to toss into the Royal Legion of Armenelos, getting some great value off those low-tier Javies. Shadow Guard charging downhill, mobilizing all the reserves that they have left to try and staunch the bleeding, try and hold back Mordor so that they can destroy them down in the valley here. Got some Numenorean Shield Guard from Set of the Dark Cloud, boldly charging into the rear of the Mordor forces, trying to get an encirclement, trying to do the damage they need to do, but again, they're not pushing with these pikes, and I think that is part of the reason why they're not able to do the damage as quickly as they need to. We got some units here on the verge of routing a large number of Mordor infantry on the verge of collapse. And a single successful push from those pikes would be enough, I think, to break a significant number of these units. What do we have over here? Kurogurochan's Light Lancers running afoul of the Alcarondas faithful from Sin of the Dark Cloud, who have done a fair amount of cavalry hunting this game. Sin has definitely used his Alcarondas faithful well. Just if his ally had preserved his cavalry for a little bit later in the game, I think that his job would be a hell of a lot easier than it is right now. Orc Javelins now being silenced. They are spearmen, however. Just not very good spearmen. But still, spearmen nonetheless. I think now's a time to be aggressive with these Romena Sentinels. There's really nothing that can stand against them. Alcarondas faithful could quite easily, I believe, rout these Mordor archers, leaving these Romena Sentinels free to do their bloody work. And over here, let's get down and dirty with it. You can see the casualties for the orcs piling high, but they finished, I think, most of the Numenoreans up here, or now Sin is feeling confident enough in his unit supremacy up here on the hill that he is going to pull out some of those reserves. So Romena marksmen here fighting. It's just chaos everywhere. Just bands of enemies fighting each other with no cohesion anymore. We got here Numenorean units, or Numenorean Shadow Guard, and I think another company of Marines being brought down as flanking forces to aid the Numenorean Shield Guard. What do we have up here? Royal Legion of Armenelos. A very bold charge uphill against the Temple Guard. Not one I think that is going to be successful, and certainly not a good use of this elite and very expensive unit. We're coming down to it. The final few frames. And they're ahead by 6%, but so far it's been about 5 to 7% the entire time. Numenor is really making the Mordor forces pay, but there's just so many of them, and now these Orc Javelins in behind the Numenorean lines. Well, if they drop those spears and pull out some Javies, I think the Numenoreans are going to be in big trouble. What do we have here? Kurogurochan using his Light Lancers to devastating effect to even out this fight. The Eldolande Swordmasters, of all things, broken. And now Mordor is going to be able to surround the surviving Numenoreans and take them down. There goes the second Mordor general. I believe that's Peaks General. Unfortunately, most of the forces down in the valley belong to Rhudaur, so that is not going to affect them. What we got here? Alcaron's Faithful charging into the rear of some Temple Executioners, trying to help out their own Temple Guard. Some Nazgul in there as well. Don't think I saw the Nazgul in the army comp section. It's all right though. Alcaron's Faithful pulling out of there. Numenorean Lancers from Rhudaur being brought to bear against the rear of the Temple Guard. Oh, this is gonna be nasty. Well, they might catch them. Alcaron's Faithful, unfortunately, going to be too far away to stop that charge from going off. And they are going to get a piece of the Numenorean Lancers at the very least, but I think that their full-time duty needs to be to chase these guys down and destroy them. Although it might be too little too late. Now that this this right wing of the Numenorean formation has been completely annihilated, I don't think it's going to matter. I think Mordor has the numbers and they have the elites necessary to deal with the remaining Numenor forces. There's a fair amount down here in the valley, and they're still in pretty good condition. A lot of them are... oh, I actually do have some exhausted forces here, but there are some that are winded, some that are even fresh. And now the Mordor forces under Rhudaur beginning to break. Another charge here from the Lancers. Going to clip some of the Marines. Not going to be as devastating as it would have been. That would have caused a rout right there, thanks to the presence of the Alcaron's Legion. But still, again, this throwing away their cavalry early on has really cost them down here in the late game. It's a shame that Lango didn't pull back his cavalry, because I don't think that this would be a problem. I think that Numenor would still be in really good shape. They've taken a lot of casualties from rear charges, however, and that's really evened out the numbers game. What do we got here? I think I've been reading this wrong. I think the Numenoreans have been down by about 5% instead of it being the other way around. That's okay. Still, it is quite a close game. Still 5% between the two factions, but the Numenoreans have so many elites. You have these Romanus Sentinels here, and they're gonna have a field day cutting down those orc low-tier spearmen. But up here, what do we got? Romana Marines fighting to the death. There's a lot of Temple Executioners still left over, and that's the big scary part. And some Temple Guard as well. Minas Morgul chosen in the Rhudaur routing off finally. Alcaron's Faithful from Sin of the Dark Cloud still around. Rhudaur's Light Lancers down to 17. They need to hunt these guys. That needs to be their full-time job right now, is zoning out those Numenorean Lancers. But unfortunately, Sin of the Dark Cloud isn't doing that. You got the Alcaron's Faithful here in the back trying to run down some routing units, trying to cause routes, which I think is what he's going for here. He's trying to cause a mass rout, use the low mortar morale and the fact that many of their units are now exhausted against them, and try and pull off a miraculous victory. But I think that the Numenorean units could simply face down what's left. They just need to not be charged any longer. But I suppose that's easy to say in hindsight. Just a devastating fight for both sides here. Isildur's Honor Guard still has an opportunity to pull this out. Ooh, we got Nazgul here. That's nasty. More javelins from Rhudaur, desperately trying to disengage from the Romana Marines. Might just be that they're doing a shield wall push. They are spearmen after all. And the Romana soldiers outnumbered and surrounded, not doing very well even against the Orc javelins. Let's see what's going on up here. Not enough Numenorians still left over. Got some Shadow Guard mixed in with some Romana Sentinels. Wonder what happened to Sin of the Dark Cloud's cavalry. Seems like they might have been cut down. Temple Guard now and some of the few remaining Numenorean Lancers. Charging downhill into the small pockets of Numenorians that remain. Ooh, a rear charge against the Romana Sentinels. Very risky. But a nice charge nonetheless by Rhudaur. It's going to send those Romana units almost to the verge of routing. He's going to follow that up with a charge from the Temple Guard, and this is going to be the end, I believe, of Numenor. Good night, sweet prince. Got some breaking down here as the Romana Sentinels begin to flee. The Spearmen will fight to the death, but I don't think it's going to matter. Temple Guard, Temple Executioners. A good deal of Mordor elites still remaining down in the valley. Alcarandas faithful still have 3. Sin of the Darkcloud still is his general, but there he goes. Isildur has fallen, and the Ring of Power goes down with him. So we have up here Remena Sentinels fighting back to back, fighting to the death. But with the loss of their lord and most of the army, there's very little that they can do, and it's going to come down to 99 to 92%. A very close battle, 2v3, not exactly the most balanced of scenarios, but still fun to watch. Look at this, just look at this body stricken, or this valley rather, stricken with the bodies of the fallen. Absolutely choked. I'd hate to be the person that cleans this up. Now Kurogoro-chan using his troll catapult, getting some shots into his own units, taking down his own temple guard, because why not? Let's see, what's remaining? What is left? Could still be fighting. Is it one? Oh no, it's one of the Alcarandas faithful fleeing. Some small survivors of Numenor to be hunted down later by the victorious forces of Sauron. Just a handful of survivors. About I think about 4,000 or so Numenorians. But at what cost to Sauron, as Sauron won this engagement? It's a lot of dead, some irreplaceable Numenorians on his part, a lot of dead orcs, but you can always get more of them. But this was certainly a disastrous victory for the forces of Sauron, but a victory nonetheless. Let's go ahead and we're going to fast forward it here. That's going to be the end of the battle. Damn nice work on the part of Numenor. At the very least, they got a ton of kills. There were some big mistakes which ultimately cost them the game. Throwing away their cavalry early and then opening up their lines so that the Mordor cavalry could simply come through and slaughter the Numenorians, and there wasn't a ton that they could do about it with only a single unit of cavalry. So yeah, I think that was definitely the 2 mistakes there that turned what would have been a pretty solid victory, in my opinion, into a crushing defeat. Let's take a look here and see if we can get an idea of how the units performed. Numenorean Shadow Guard getting a ton. They are Rangers, however, so this is to be expected in this kind of situation. Remena Marksmen, ton of kills. Some of the Remena Marines not doing so great. That's alright. Lango doing very, very well. Eldolande Swordmasters with 363 kills. The other one got 61. I think they got charged to pieces by one of the Melkor's chosen units. And there you have it. A win for Numenor. A near miss for Numenor. Hope you guys have enjoyed this little spotlight. I hope you'll join me for whatever comes next. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.